Okay, we're live. This meeting is being live streamed. Welcome to James and Willem's or Willem and James's creative sessions, where we get creative.
Or talk about it anyway.
Oh, well, you see, conversation is creative. Conversations create. So,
I like that.
which bit?
Conversations create. It's not usually because I was implying the other way around.
Well, they do. Well, we think they do. I'm just closing a few things in case my computer decides to fall over. So we haven't spoken for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Apparently, you've been raving about a book.
I have. Yes,
Now,
thank you.
so much so, you've been posting on one of our group chats about. Actually, did you even post on our group chat about the book?
I think I did. Yeah, I did.
You did. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I can't remember which group chat.
I did. So I have got a copy on my Kindle. I haven't started it.
Oh,
so
well, you should totally start it. I had a copy on my Kindle since the day it came out, and I read it now, and I devoured it in a few days. That's how good it is. For me, I thought.
So the people watching, we haven't even mentioned what the title is yet, have we?
Oh yeah, no, that's right. So the book it's on the title of the video, and for once, I put the title of the video, and we're actually talking about the thing in the first couple of minutes, which is amazing for us.
It is amazing. So Tim Urban, Wait But Why?
But why? His website, he's known for his website, Wait But Why. He's known for his TED Talk about procrastination and the instant gratification monkey. But there's a lot of writings on his website, and the book he just published a month and a bit ago, I think it was like early April.
Oh my God.
What's Our Problem? A self-help book for societies.
That's a big, bold,
long title and a bold title. It is a bold title. He said he got, and I read. Then he also, because he writes posts about writing stuff, which is also fascinating. So for example, if you've come across his TED Talk about procrastination, which is fantastic, and it's based on a long post about procrastination. Almost even better, his super long post about preparing for his TED Talk. And he's distinguished several levels of preparedness for public speaking in the same way that he deconstructs everything, and it's super interesting.
I haven't read those.
It's very good.
Right up my street.
I used it for some class course lessons for my students on public speaking. It's really good. Public speaking as in when they prepare a presentation in a group. So I paraphrased it and summarized it for my students one year.
Okay, so slight tangent.
Yeah.
When you hear about people like him, I just think I could have done that. I should be doing that. Why can't we do stuff like that? And
because we keep talking, not writing.
Well, I write, but it's just not.
No, I write too, but I mean, not. Yes, if anything, that's what's funny is that I was just telling you before we hit the stream button that I'm thinking about my professional life, career, and whether I want to change or how, etc. And really, I'm like, I want to do what he does, which doesn't really exist. It's just he's created it. Honestly, I've created a lot of what I do now, but I think I need to add a few more strings to the bow.
This is very good because I was listening
to the quiver. I don't know what the right analogy is.
Quivers to the. I don't know what is a quiver.
The quiver is where you put the arrows in.
Oh yeah, okay. For some reason I was thinking the quiver was the back.
So I first said strings to my bow, but it was like no, the bow only has one string. That doesn't make sense.
But I'm just imagining a bow with multiple strings that you can fire multiple arrows. Because we're going to come back to Dungeons and Dragons anyway, because I watched the film. But
yes, we should. And I started rereading the book, and I want to create a character with you and all that stuff.
So we've already tangentialized, but I was listening.
But just before any of the one or two audience drops off, the whole message is read the book from Tim Urban, and we'll go into explaining what it is in a second, and we'll go into tangent now.
Yeah, and I don't care if you spoil it because I will read it. It's not going to be my next book, but I will read it.
It's fine. I'll spoil. I mean, you can't. It's one of those where I can only go into explaining some of the base principles of the book, and I can't really spoil that much. I mean, explaining it. Did you read my review? No, you didn't.
The one on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Great. Well, that's really, I would probably paraphrase that. And
okay, fine.
Probably dig in a little bit more, but
okay, so you know what you said about creating a job, and you're like, he made up what he does. I listened to a podcast with Kevin Kelly, who I think is really cool. You know,
who's that again? It rings a bell, but I can't.
He's one of the founders of Wired. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
He wrote the post, 1,000 True Fans.
Oh, that one, yeah.
He's got a book coming out. He's like late 60s. He's been around since the dawn of the internet and technology and whatever. He's a commentator on technology, but really cool guy. Just cool. Just so interesting. And he says, like, he says things like, in your 20s, you want to be like doing weird stuff, and as you get older,
it rings a bell.
Just like keep exploring or whatever. But he said this thing where you want to be doing a job where you can't explain it to your mom. She doesn't quite know what you're doing, because then you'll keep creating. You've made it yours and something like that. That's what I took from what he said.
Well, I certainly have that already. Being a strategic planner is something that most people do not understand. And I think most people in the job world don't even understand.
But when
I work with clients, they call me back and they're really happy to work with me. But it's just to get them on board, I have a hard time.
But you're kind of saying that, is this it? Is this what you really want to do?
Oh, what I'm doing now?
Yeah.
Yes, I feel like I need a change in not necessarily what I'm doing it, but how I'm doing it, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense.
I'm struggling to keep up with, I'm sure I've told you this before, and I'm a bit of a broken record, because I was like, wait a minute, this is all familiar. It's happened before. I've said it before many times, I think.
Like all of us.
Well, yeah, sure. But
you're not alone, is what I mean by that.
Oh, thank you. I am so I can't figure out if this is a function of having moved a lot, but certainly it does play into it, of moving back to France, and France being a very different environment from everything I've done professionally before. Paris is its own beast. If you haven't been raised professionally in it, it's really difficult to make your way. And then I have, on top of that, so I'm only like tangentially answering your question, and I know I'm doing that on purpose, but and when I look at what I want to do, I want to be in France, and I'm bilingual, and it fits. But I also don't fit with the French professional culture. I have very little experience with the French professional culture, and ultimately I want to keep writing, thinking, and operating in English. But I like to live in France.
Okay.
And those two things, I mean, yes, I can make it up and make it work, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm again just setting myself up for something that doesn't make any sense to most people anyway, and I don't know how I'm going to make it work. Now, to circle back to your question, I feel I've been exchanging messages with a few other peers, let's say. So I have a hard time keeping up, and even though I've started posting again, but I'm like just kind of forcing myself to on LinkedIn. I feel like I don't have the same level of interest for talking about the advertising, marketing, and communications industry as a way to promote myself.
Yeah.
And just to keep up with what's happening. I still enjoy working with clients when I do, and they call me back, and I have a positive contribution. The more I read books, like, and I think this was a big one last year. So this has been, it was a little bit there before, but it's been strong since I moved to France and the pandemic, which I think a lot of people had a chance to think about, like, what I'm doing? Does it make any kind of sense? And then reading something like, I'm just making it, I don't know if it's exactly that, but I'll just make a connection. Sure. Reading Bullshit Jobs. This is like really big on like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Advertising and marketing straight up just is and he literally quotes research saying that it's something that from all metrics is something that just completely removes value from society rather than adds it altogether. So I'm like, well, do I want to keep doing something that removes value from society and that I'm not so excited about anymore? Not really, but it's also the main thing I know to do to make money, to be able to maybe save enough to do something else. Or I also think that I have valuable experience that I can apply to something else, but I'm not sure what. It's likely to be my own business, so I'm looking at that direction. Because I also have a hard time seeing myself working with for other people. Although you never know, it could work, but the interest in having a full-time job is to have a regular salary come in, and it's been a while since I've had that. And what I have instead is, and I've talked about it with you, and anybody working freelance has this experience of the feast or famine of not knowing necessarily where the next thing comes up and dips. So which is where I am right now. I have finished jobs. I have a bit of work with the school, which is my main kind of red line that allows me to have a bit of income. But come the summer, it usually dies down because there's less work there. And the year started really well from a financial standpoint in projects, and this month it's suddenly just not as much. And
is that
also
because projects are coming to an end?
I finished projects with clients,
okay.
So I need new ones.
Yeah,
I didn't really have much pipeline, which I'm putting back on, not doing the work while I have work with clients because I can't be bothered. Except that now I'm paying for it, but it's like, in hindsight, of course, it's 2020. I knew that I should have kept my pipeline and kept thinking and kept communicating, etc. And I also, and I know it's because it's like what's the saying for that? The saying in French is coming to mind, but it doesn't work in English.
Say it in French. What is it?
Les cordonniers sont toujours les plus mal chaussés. There's an equivalent, which is the shoemakers are always the ones with the worst shoes. Meaning to say, I help other businesses promote and organize, position their brand, and I'm the one that is always like dilly-dallying and wondering exactly I should be doing my website, I should be organizing a bunch of stuff, keep up with writing, be very clear how I write, how I communicate, how I position myself as a consultant. And there's always ongoing work with that, and my website is way behind. I started working a little bit on that. So anyway, you get a sense of, like, I could keep going, but you get my drift.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening at the moment.
There's a few things that see. I've always admired how
we've gone far from what's our problem. Although I'm talking about what my problem is.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think what I'm gonna link it back anyway. But sure. I do admire how you are always willing to put yourself in at the deep end and you swim.
Well, the flip side of that is I always put myself into those kinds of situations, but then it allows me to not build bigger, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, it does, because to build anything bigger, you need consistency, not like jumping into things and then jumping into the next thing. And then I do wonder if some of the themes in Tim Urban's book you're actually living and experiencing. I'm wondering.
Probably.
I don't know.
Certainly from other stuff. I circled back to his post about career and went back to the career worksheet as well.
The octopus thing.
The octopus, which was both quite interesting, but also felt like, well, this is interesting, but I don't know how much it works for me at this point. There's a lot of it that feels geared to somebody who is at the beginning of their career and not in the middle. I know very well, I think I have a good grasp on what my strengths are, but it's just how to pivot and adapt them and make them work in a French or job market altogether. And I spend too much time overthinking everything, just like I'm doing in this conversation, right? No, well, it's true. I came across somebody this week. Somebody introduced me to somebody else who says that she has a board game methodology and she's apparently printed it and everything, and helps businesses figure out their mission and their values with this board game.
Wow.
So it seemed interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot about it that doesn't seem to be, sorry if ever this person comes across it, but seems not, there's a little chance, but you never know. The way it was presented seemed to lack a lot of rigor.
Mm-hmm.
And my exchange with the person seemed to be a little bit all over the place and a bit not filling me with confidence. So on one hand, I was very interested to hear how that system worked.
Yeah.
On another hand, and the big thing, so I'm like criticizing, because it's easy to criticize, what was commendable and awesome is that that person went ahead with doing it, printing it, and had a lot of props. I've only ever thought about it and thought about how all the ways in which it doesn't work, and still haven't done any printing or any kind of finishing.
Yeah.
And I had a good conversation with a professional friend slash we do the same kind of job about that this week, and I'm way behind, years behind, on things like my brand strategy model, which I have, but I stopped working in the middle, and which is typical of me. I like do things, don't finish them, just like the stories in the writing I talk about. So yeah, all that to say, I overthink things, and then I end up like going back to the drawing board rather than, and learning new things and integrating them, which there is a lot of what Tim Urban does. And he did that with his book, actually, because his book came out as a series of posts in 2020. Then he went back to the drawing board, started over again, spent another 3 years and 6 years in total to write this book. And he's writing another book that he's about to publish on the back of that one. So he had 2 books of material to be publishing.
So what does he say about finishing stuff?
I don't know what he says about finishing stuff, but he has probably people behind him doing it. I don't know.
Because you said he's written about, I know, I love his TED talk, and I've played it to students, and I think it's great. Procrastination monster, all of that kind of thing. Then you said there's also the posts about preparing for public speaking that are really good. Yeah. But how does he finish a post? Surely he has a post about how to finish things.
Maybe, actually, it's a good point. I should check.
One of the posts that you shared with me that I really like is, and I keep meaning to buy it, and I keep forgetting to buy it. The poster is the poster with all the dots on it.
Yeah, which he's reused the visualization method, and he has at the beginning of the book. And I came across this poster a few years ago about putting history and time into perspective, which has got timelines from one typical day. To the lifetime of the universe, and scary stuff about, there's like everything before the Big Bang, which we don't really know. It's confusing. And then all theories are saying that the world is going to end, the universe is going to end in X billion years.
I like things like that.
The post is fantastic. I'll send it to you. It's just visualizations. It gets increasingly like confusing and depressing because it's like, all right, well, in 5 billion years, the sun is going to swallow up the earth, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean for us? Well, but he can't even fathom 5 billion years.
Exactly, but that's what I want to. So I want to get the one where you color in a year of your life. I want to get one for home, one for work, and just have it there, because I like stuff like that, and color it in every year. But and
I thought about it last weekend because I had a death. We had a death in the family. I was visiting family with my partner. And one of the intentions was to visit my great aunt and uncle. And sadly, just as we were on our way, my great uncle passed away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite, well, it's both tragic, but also he had a very long, full life. He went over by 4 years the display. The display is for 90 years. And he went to 94. So yeah. It was a bit sad because they lost their daughter recently, and he was already not very well, and he didn't, take that very well. So, and the sad thing being that we just were literally there on our way, and we missed him, sort of.
Wow. But then it's stuff like that where you realize this is it. There isn't anything else.
Yeah. So it's both, and it's a funny one because it's both. Was great to be visiting family, and also circle back to what is it that is important to me that I want to spend my time on.
Yeah.
And you read something like Bullshit Jobs and other things, and you're like, well, work is not that important. I want to earn enough money and do things that I like and hang out with people I love and do cool things. But the more it's gone in the last few years, and this is funny because this is professionally what I'm known for, if anything, which is very little. The very few people that know me socially in a professional environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't have enough people. Well, I don't have enough. That's a judgment, which may or may not be true. But I've moved around a lot. So all the people I've worked with in the past are all over the planet. and there's all the people I kept in touch with through professional networking who know who I am, but haven't know I'm a nice guy, but haven't necessarily worked with me, wouldn't necessarily vouch for my work because they don't necessarily know. They'd be like, oh, I think he's good and he's smart, but I honestly haven't worked with him, so I can't really tell you 100% whether he's worth working with. So that's kind of interesting, and none of them are in France. Actually, yeah, maybe one. So where was I going with this?
Well, you read Bullshit Jobs. You've read Tim Urban's book. Coming back to Tim Urban's
I can go back to his book, yeah.
Yeah, no. So
I felt like I'm not rambling.
You're not rambling. Here's my question then.
Yeah.
Everything you've been experiencing about your job, what you do, procrastinating, writing, trying to find a way for, like, you read Bullshit Jobs, you're like, what am I doing? What value am I adding? All of that kind of stuff. That, to me, listening to you, does feel like it fits into the title of Tim Urban's book.
Yeah.
It does fit in. Because he's saying, as a society, does he talk about economics? Does he talk about economic systems? Does he talk about that kind of stuff?
Not really, no.
He doesn't. Is he talking about? Well, what's he talking about?
Not so much. Well, I'll tell you what he talks about.
Yeah, tell me. Is it the history of humanity?
The history of humanity is in the introduction. That's it.
Okay.
The history. So that's where he has a display, because he says, well, there's a short just where we're going and where we've been, because this book is about societies, as a reminder that human beings have been around, our species been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Most history and bodies place it around 300,000 to 400,000 years, which is a long time. Not so long ago, we thought it was like around 50. And actually, it turns out to be we've been around much, much longer than that, Homo sapiens, as far as I understood the book. You need to double check. There's tons of references and links and etc. But this is just the first few pages.
Yep.
And so, as a reminder, and he goes, well, if the story of our species was a book of 1,000 pages, each page representing 250 years, this is where we have a display.
He's so good at this stuff. He's so good.
Yeah, he's like, just to put things into perspective, let's remember that if you put this as 1,000, like the first 999 pages would be presumably us as hunter-gatherers.
Yes.
And then the last 10 pages at the bottom are more or less recorded history from the beginning of the agricultural revolution.
This is what
we're only in the last 4 or 5 pages. Since the last 4 or 5 pages, he puts one important figure per page. So Jesus Christ, and I think he chose Gandhi for this 250 years. As in, let's just remember that all the stuff that we are learning as ancient history is only very recent history. It's not even going to how old the world is, just how
I know. This is so good, what you're saying. I really like what you're saying.
And this is just the first few pages.
Okay.
So he's just like, all right, like putting things into perspective. The reason for that is to remind the reader and himself and everybody that the way that we've built ourselves up to be biologically, brain and everything, was adapted to this presumably hunter-gatherer culture for hundreds of thousands of years, and that things have accelerated massively over the last few hundred, and we're still adapting to what we've created that has gone extremely fast.
This is something I feel really strongly about. Like our evolutionarily, we are designed to, live in small groups and eat whatever and do whatever and blah, blah, blah. The modern world is not that. It really isn't. And like a bit like he says in Jurassic Park, keep thinking about Jurassic Park as you're talking. Life finds a way.
It as well.
But the whole thing in Jurassic Park, like technology has gone kaboom. Our brains are still the same.
Well, but it's both, because it's thanks to our brain that we've created this kaboom. We did it.
Yeah, true. It's true.
It is we are and we aren't. We're both, and that's what he talks about, and that's the main object and the main thing in the book. The following thing he gets into, and that's the main core. Okay. There's a lot more principles and visualizations and ways to understand the world, but the main big one is what he calls the ladder. And he distinguishes the next thing along, which is kind of similar to System 1, System 2 from Daniel Kahneman, but it's another thing. So he takes ideas from, and he quotes a lot of Jonathan Haidt, which I didn't know who that was. So I should read his books apparently. And he takes some ideas from Yuval Noah Harari about, you know, his whole thesis in Sapiens is what allows us to be where we are is our ability to work in very large loose groups or coordinated like ants, but also like mammals. So he takes some of that, he takes some of System 1, System 2, some of other psychology books, and creates his own thing, which kind of makes sense intuitively and just like he does in general. So he says that we're made of the primitive mind, and our primitive mind is the one that has survived for hundreds of thousands of years out in the steppes and is built for survival. It's mostly our lower brain, but he doesn't only say that it is, because it's just like I've made up a way to talk about our behavior. So where it comes from in the brain is probably mostly the stem reptilian brain, but not only. So that's the primitive mind. And he creates this little blob with a torch, and there's this little blob with a torch, and it's blurry behind the little character. That's our primitive mind. And then on top, it's just like, well, we have our higher functioning minds, rationalizing, creative ideas, engineering, all that stuff that has allowed us to evolve as fast as we have over the past few thousand years. And that he calls the higher mind. And the ladder he's got 4 rungs on the ladder, and the ladder is a visual representation of how we're thinking between the primitive and the higher mind. And we're always going up and down on the ladder, depending on what the topic is, where we are. And he distinguishes different ways of thinking for the 4 rungs. The top rung is the higher mind is totally in charge and holding the primitive mind on a leash. And then the next one along is the higher mind is a bit, you know, the primitive mind has a little bit more power. And then the next one along, the primitive mind starts being in charge, and the lowest rung, it's completely in charge. And he distinguishes names for each one. So the top rung is the scientists, so approaching things from a very rational, different experimentation, looking at all the different possibilities, arguing for things, thinking, etc., full thinking. Then the next rung along is a sports fan, rooting for their team. So he's going to look at things rationally, but he also really, really loves one particular option, which is their favorite team. So he's going to root for them. The next one along is the attorney.
Oh, okay.
The attorney is, you know, whether it's right or wrong, he's going to keep arguing for his side of the thing. Because that's his job. And he's going to twist and turn and use arguments in a way to justify their position, to defend their argument. And the primitive mind is the zealots.
Okay, right. Wow. That wasn't what I was expecting, but that sounds okay.
No, so that's when you're arguing things and discussing things on how you think on the primitive mind, you think as a zealot. You think, then he shows all sorts of different ways and examples, because when you're a zealot on the primitive mind, any attack on how you're thinking is a personal attack to you, and it doesn't fit your frame of mind whatsoever. So what you do is you defend and attack back, rather than the top mind. The scientist is like people discussing different theories, different ways, and hopefully something good comes out of it. So this whole idea of the ladder of how you think allows him to create a vertical stand of how you think, in addition to a horizontal one of what you think. And so a large part of the book is applying it to politics. For example, the horizontal left-right separation now becomes not only left or right, but also up and down, whether you're thinking primitively or like a scientist with a higher mind. And then the next big concept along in the book, I would say, There's a bunch of others, little by little, but the beginning of the book has most of the core concepts that are the most important. Then he talks about a lot of stuff going on in America, but really also in the world. So it's very America-centric. And he says so at the beginning, but he also says, well, there's a lot of the things that I'm talking about that are global in nature, but you would have to go find your own examples for your own country and what's going on in your own country, because it's going to be different. But a lot of what he talks about are global phenomenons that he has examples from Europe, from India, and from the UK, as well as the US. So it's not only, it's vast majority of US, but the principles are applicable everywhere.
And you could, as you were reading it, you were thinking France, you were thinking wherever.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't have to go think very far, because most of the stuff, because culturally the US has such an impact on the whole global north, that everything that he's talking about is something that we're experiencing. Increased polarization, division.
Yes.
So, but then the core of the large part, I'll talk about what the large part of the book is, but there's one other concept I wanted to mention, which is, so the other big idea is that life organizes itself in increasingly larger units. So at the smaller scale, you have an atom, and the atom could bring bunches together, creates molecules. We're a big set of molecules. So on the top rung of that, it's a different, he calls it, what does he call it? The emergence. I can't remember. The emergence. It's not a ladder, because that's the ladder is the other thing. The emergence scale. I can't remember. Something like that. I have to go find it. I might have it. I might have saved a screenshot somewhere. And so you have, like, from an atom, multiple atoms, molecules, unicellular organisms, creature. And then, but then multiple social creatures create something else.
Yeah.
That's where we go into society. So we go into individual. So he uses the same scale to go, well, actually, it's kind of the same thing. We'll just keep building up. So you go from one individual to several individuals, a family, a community, a society. So he's like, well, our minds, because we operate and work together, the minds go the same way. So we have primitive mind all the way to higher mind, but we have the same thing for groups and societies when we bunch up together. And so he distinguishes that when higher minds bunch up together, it creates a certain kind of thinking, and when primitive mind bunches together, it creates a certain mind of thinking. So he calls up higher mind thinking genie, and lower mind thinking together are golems. It's super interesting. So those are the main core principles of the book, I would say.
But just listening to you,
there's a bunch of other stuff right there.
But just listening to you, I'm thinking about how much really I can relate to that.
Oh yeah, it's
as an individual,
really good.
As a group, and also, like, I can also, for me, listening to myself, thinking about myself as a teacher. Do I want to be a teacher? What am I contributing? What's really happening? But I'm part of a school, and then even at school with my colleagues, people have, even in teaching, you have, just like you're saying, the zealots and the scientists on that level, just the same thing.
And the thing to remember is that we're not at one rung all the time. We move all the time.
Yeah. Oh wow. And then also listening to you with grappling with, okay, what do I want to do for my job? I know what I'm good at. I've got an idea. Like, how do I fit in with that? And just write a book, Willem.
Yes, I need to. and I look back at, like, what I said I wanted to do when I was 15, and that's like all I wanted to do since I was a kid, and I still don't do it.
What, write a book?
Yeah.
Really? Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah. That's what I've always wanted to do. And I forgot for a long time because didn't forget completely, but I put it to the side because I needed a career and money, and life went by. And I look back when we talk about the Landmark Forum, the course, sometimes I did it when I was 16. And that's what I wanted to do. I look back I can't remember, I found some notes or something. But
you wanted to write a book? Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to be a writer. Write a book. That was what I wanted, and I still haven't finished writing a book. We get in our own ways. In the best of ways. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
I mean,
we are our own best
worst
allies
enemy.
and worst enemies.
Yeah,
Which makes sense. I mean, it's completely stupid to say because we're just one person, but there's a lot going on. And by the way, that's another way to talk about the higher mind and the primitive mind.
Yeah, it is.
But
I get it.
Yes, and it's not necessarily the right analogy because you've got to be careful mixing analogies because the primitive mind does what it does to survive. It does its best to survive. And he talks about the golems. So the higher minds are great at coming up with crazy new technology, new ideas, new political systems, new creative stuff, etc. But for a long time, what prevailed was the golem, because what the golem is good for is survival. What the golem is good for is smashing the other ones or defending itself. In a place where he goes and talks about Genghis Khan and the Khans, which is really terrifying. But so yeah, so then a lot of the book. Then there's a big chapter. So then he goes into talking and to use the principles he's created to look at society. And that's where he goes mostly and look at the US. There's a large chapter about the history of the Republican Party. And then there's a really big piece, which forms like more than a third of the book about basically the American left, if you will. And what's been going on there for a while. So, and the large part of that is about him distinguishing what he calls a social justice movement from what he distinguishes as a social justice fundamentalism.
Okay, right.
Which is lower rung social justice, if you will.
Yeah,
like primitive mind. And yeah, and then he goes quickly to the end. The end is very brief. So then I circled back to his Reddit, Ask Me Anything. And that was one of the, so people were asking, like, how come this, like, there's such a huge part about criticizing what's going on the left? And he said, well, actually, I polled my readership, and most of my readers, 3/4 of them are like identify as liberal, even though he redefines liberal in the book as, so he called them progressive, because in the media, usually what's called liberal is kind of on the left. But he goes back to the definition, which I think Yuval Noah Harari also uses, of liberal being the society that we've created that is what the founding fathers of the US had in mind about democracy, where we discuss things together and agree like that. There's the definition in there, I can't remember. So he calls that progressive. He calls the American left progressive. And yeah, 3/4 of his readership are. So he spent a lot more time looking at that side of the party rather than bashing on, Trump supporters, if you will, or something that could be taken as such.
Which is too easy.
It's
too easy to do. Yeah.
The chapter is very well done on the history of the Republican Party, but there's a lot more. And the other reason is that there's a lot of things right now, and this is what he's worried about, that become taboo to talk about in a way that he feels is very anti-democratic. And it's very interesting because he has a lot of examples. Some of them I had heard about, but also he diagnoses a lot of the feelings of why I don't really want to engage in social media anymore. And he talks to a lot of the people and what happens when there's a bunch of other principles in those parts of the book as well, of what happens when the primitive mind from a societal standpoint takes a hold, and it just quashes free speech, anybody wanting to talk about it. He uses other kinds of analogies. So there's King Mustache. King Mustache is the son of King Beard, and he takes over the country and then says, well, nobody can make fun of my mustache, you're not allowed. And anyway, so he talks about how opinions get quashed.
Same, you can say both in English.
So you go through, okay, if you're not allowed and the consequences are too dire, you stop, but you still think it. But if you still think it and the ideas don't propagate into society, but you don't know who's thinking what and what's allowed, and then you just go towards, the main mainstream.
The mainstream pushed the standard view that dilutes. No conversation.
Yeah.
And this and,
So,
and what,
and the whole point, it's interesting because some people who are criticizing the book says we're saying, well, there's a whole host of other problems that are more pressing than what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And he says, well, one, he says several times, like in the whole part about the right and the left in the US, he's like, it doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not on what I'm talking about. Ultimately, I'm more than happy if you disagree with me. But my point is that there's the point of the book is where is their lower and higher mind thinking? Whether you disagree on the principles, he's like, please disagree with me, but let's talk about it like rational human beings. And what's missing is the ability for us to talk about that together.
Yeah, it is.
That's what he's pointing out to. And the point he's trying to make with the whole book is to say, well, if we cannot discuss things and agree and disagree in a rational manner, we can't solve any of the other problems we have going on. That's where he's like, that's why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. It's like, we can't do anything for the environment. We can't do anything for the political system. We can't do anything for poverty.
This is very good. This is very good because we had a training session all about like environmentalism, like turning off the lights, electricity consumption at our school. And I'm like, great, nudges, whatever, okay. And then at the same time, I was also thinking a lot of what you said that he says in the book. We've only been around, as written history's only been around a couple of thousand or a few thousand years. Like we've been surviving for X thousands, hundreds of thousands of years before because of our brain thinking at a certain level, all that kind of stuff. And I kept thinking, like, okay, if I was to question any of what's being said, then I would get jumped on. I don't feel comfortable asking a question about what's the bigger history of what humanity's done to the environment. Okay, how do we talk about this stuff? I wanted to ask, how can we talk about this stuff and feel that everyone is free to be able to express an opinion about this? Because if people are not free to express any opinion that they want and they're not going to be listened to, then it's just going to turn into this big fight. And I don't want that. I just want to be able to have a conversation about stuff, whatever it might be. And there was what you've articulated and what you've said and what he's talking about in his book.
Yeah, and I'm only articulating what he said, which I thought was brilliant, and he took several years to come up with it, which I really like it. So
yeah, I really like it too from what you said, and what Tim Urban's articulating is, and the way you've explained it, and what I'm left with is, it explains why I felt uncomfortable in that training session with the entire school there.
Yeah.
I was like,
and he talks a lot about academia as a whole place that's one of the first places where a lot of free speech, for lack of a better word, but is taken a hold of. It explains it very well. What do you mean?
Sorry, academia, free speech.
There's a lack of free speech in academia.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
There are things that you say now that you will get real consequences for and get fired.
Yeah,
because you're only raising points and they're not allowed anymore.
Yeah, which is
in American academia, but elsewhere as well.
But it feels feels
probably not about the environment necessarily, but
no, yeah. But that happened to be the thing that we were talking about. But that feels unscientific. That feels anti-academic.
Exactly.
To not be able to. So it's okay. You're giving me a lot to think about here.
I mean, you have to read the book for the rest of it, but
I'm gonna have to. But I got 2 new books to read. But
I devoured it. It's really good.
So this book, there was something else I was going to say about the. Oh yeah, here it is. So have you read The Shallows? You did, didn't you?
Yeah.
You did read The Shallows, because some of what you're saying to me reminds me of The Shallows, with our inability to have a rational conversation about how we're going to solve society's problems.
Yeah. And he talks about, by the way, he doesn't only talk about society, he talks about the media. And there's diagrams about evolution of media that plays into and contributes massively to the way that the thinking is gone.
And that's what
social
he
media
about.
that has supercharged everything as well.
Yeah.
So social media has been evolved in such a way that it's supercharged tribalism.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what he talks about. He has other diagrams to explain that too. So going from basically, in short, is kind of going from the time where we had a few TV channels, everybody's watching the same thing, to then the beginning of cable news and 24-hour news that started to have a slant on what they were doing. So to have a slant because they had a lot of time to fill, they needed to, attract an audience. So it started to go to different channels, went towards different political views and opinions to attract people. And then at the same time, that's why he talks about the history of the Republican Party. The parties, both of them actually, have started taking stances to differentiate them more in the US. Because apparently back in just after the Second World War, the parties didn't have that much difference. They had some, but I mean, to the point where he gives a couple of anecdotal examples, but interesting, where Eisenhower, when he was going to run for president, wasn't sure which party he was going to join. So, and that's not long ago. That's not that long ago. And so that one of the things is for their sins or for their whatever, he's like, well, maybe some political strategists said where both parties need to be more differentiated. So they went to both polarize, which now it's reached like a crazy point.
Yeah, it has.
And so then he talks about the change of media and then social media, that he's even supercharged everything, because it doesn't take a genius. In most books is saying that what works the most and what drives the most profit, and even like Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, has said it, that Facebook consistently chooses to make profits over what seems to be safer for people, but generally everything that causes anger, outrage, etc., is what spreads the most. And all this stuff is about lower rung, primitive mind thinking, tribalism, and fighting and protecting one another. And to go back up to and the more you have that kind of environment, the more you shut up about any kind of opinions that might be not the dominant one, which eliminates more discussion and more rationalization, more.
And what he talks about
and then
in
there's
the
a bunch of
shallows.
vicious circles.
Yeah, and what he talks about in the shallows is how that thinking is actually has an effect on, and because of neuroplasticity, on our brain.
Yeah.
And that kind of reinforces a lot of what is
and the shallows is old compared to what's happening now with TikTok.
Yeah.
My nieces and all your students and everybody who's like on TikTok full on all the time.
They are.
What does that do for neuroplasticity? I have no idea, but it makes them money.
I actually finished reading a book. So I finished reading this book.
Which is?
Which I talked about last time. Did I talk about it last time?
Brain. Yes, you did. It sounds good.
And it's I finished reading it. It's really good. It goes into how cognitively demanding reading is, and how now I've changed my lessons at school, where we do a lot of reading out loud, we do a lot of discussing, we do a fair bit of writing, but it's really made me think about my writing and how I write and what point I want to put across and all of that kind of stuff. And it's not that, it's quite technical, but it's very practical. She gives really great examples of, here's a really terrible piece of writing, here's a really good piece of writing, reworded, here's why this is good, here's why this isn't good. And it goes into the technicality of it, but it also just talk about what's happening in the brain when we're reading, and how the rhythm and the sound of a word is really important. And she also mentions the point that the written word hasn't been around that long, and it was all lecture actually comes from read, the word read, and a lecture used to be someone reading out loud and people writing down what they were saying, or writing down, so they had multiple copies of what they were saying. There's even a little bit in the book that talks about someone reading silently was weird, because reading was only ever done out loud.
I read that somewhere else. I can't remember where really.
So reading was always out loud, which makes sense for the church and for the how things. But then also, and he talks about this in the shallows, is how much that would have influenced thinking. Reading and thinking and being able to write influences our thinking. And what I think Tim Urban does so well is he's creating new ways of understanding things and new ways of thinking.
Yeah. I think from his perspective, it's very interesting to remind ourselves that reading and writing is very recent. And it's some of the stuff that has allowed us to work together and supercharge, which he does mention in passing very briefly, because there's a lot of stuff that he had to make choices and slash a large part of the book, even though it's still very long. But that's one of them, because reading and writing has allowed knowledge to be shared more widely. But when we look at stuff like social media right now and phones, I think it seems to be mostly developing. It doesn't seem to be developing our higher functions. It seems to be developing and privileging what's going on from a primitive mind perspective. Unless you're the person developing the app for others and in that business, in which case probably, but on the user end of this and kids, it's not helping them develop higher functions at all.
It's not.
And I don't think the AI is not going to do much better. I don't think.
I really don't know. I mean, Kevin Kelly's very.
I don't know enough about the AI, but I don't. But
AI.
Well, what's going on at the moment with AI
don't
is
know.
you have to. It seems like to be able to get the right kind of results, you have to think about what the right questions are and what the right content is to be able to do that. But if you don't learn anything, and if you don't know, how would you know what the right questions and right answers are? You need to have a frame of mind for that, a framework for that. Yeah,
this is exactly the point, that I'm making at school. Like if you can't read, you can't access anything. You can't access thinking or whatever. And amongst teachers, there's like the tribalism that you're talking about. Honestly, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's part of us. It's being human. It's being an animal. We're animals.
And I can see how much I move up and down on the ladder, and I want to move up and down, and I want to be able to. Sometimes I find myself. You might find this. I find myself agreeing with two extremes.
Oh, I do all the time, and
I'm like. I agree with you, and I agree with you.
I have big time analysis paralysis. That's why I end up not writing or finishing anything, because I keep learning new stuff that are opening my mind, so that it's difficult to have one position. It's much easier to have a position if you refuse other perspectives.
It is. And I see it with my friends. I don't know. I see it with my friends and friendships, like people who have really strong opinions about things and people who don't. I'm like, I agree with you both.
Yeah,
and I
have that experience a lot, but then I wonder if I'm just flaky, or people might tell me that.
That's exactly what I think.
No, I don't. I'm learning a lot of stuff, and I think you both have a point.
I'm exactly the same. I think, oh well, does it mean I stand for nothing?
Yeah, that's what I have a hard time with.
Oh my god! But then I'm like, maybe I'm just a nice person. But being nice is, if I remember right, being called nice, I thought was just a horrible insult. It's because it meant I was bland or something.
But
I'm glad that you feel the same way I do. That makes me feel better, because I just think, well, I agree with both, and I like both of you. I don't hate you because you're. I'm so glad you said what you said about the zealot, who, if you attack their opinion, it's a personal attack on them.
Yes.
Like, oh no, I'm attacking your opinion, not you. You're and it's
and you cannot convince the zealot. It's not possible.
Yes, there's no changing.
You can't. There's no changing. No open perspective. No nothing.
I'm gonna need to read this book, aren't I?
Yeah. I recommend it. I'm recommending it to everybody I'm speaking to. Borderline. Almost. And I've been meaning to send emails to other people about it.
I'll probably end up doing the same thing. So basically, for our hordes of fans watching, read it, go read it, go buy it, go read it, go check out Tim Urban, watch his TED Talk.
Yeah,
we're kind of jealous of him. We want to be able to do what he does. Even this, like, okay, I hear about people. So I think I've told you about this. During lockdown, some woman started doing TikTok videos about Excel. Have I told you about this?
I think so. It's okay. You can say it again.
She started doing
off the top of my head.
She started doing stupid videos about how to use Excel, like really simple stuff. Like, I'm like, well, I knew that, and I knew that, and I knew that, and I'm thinking, all she's done is dance around and make a stupid TikTok video about press this and then do that, and then like, right? Now, she rakes in millions from video. Now, okay, she does TikTok videos about Excel and then sells courses about how to use Excel. I'm like, she only started this in during lockdown, or like,
when I read those kinds of stories, I feel like awfully inadequate. I'm like, what have I done?
Exactly.
I've read about things, and I read about things, and then I change my mind, and then I have not produced any of the ideas, and somehow I still managed to live and earn enough money to keep functioning, which I don't know how I did that.
Having said that, when I do
know people, how I did that. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And then having said that, when I do tell people, I did my own podcast, but it was I got 8 episodes, and then my friend and I we did a whole series, and then we do a live stream, and they're like, really? How do you do all that stuff? People are impressed,
and I'm like, I don't find that particularly impressive. Nobody's watching it anyway or listening.
So I think, well, are we failure? Or am I a failure? Because I haven't.
I think that too. Sorry, that's what I mean.
Just because it's inevitable when you're consuming media where you've got the extreme exception to everything that rises up and gets everyone's attention, and then you've got everybody else just doing their thing.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I do think both of us, everybody has something to contribute, which is why the 1,000 True Fans post, I'm going to reread it today and glean some inspiration from it, because I do think it's.
I don't know about that one. Yeah, but I don't find inspiration.
You didn't like it?
Not that I don't like it, but it's not something I would go back to find new inspiration, particularly.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I like
one. It's under, for me anyway, it underestimates or doesn't talk about how difficult it is to get 1,000 True Fans. It's really, 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 really challenging today, more than when it was written. It was written a while ago too, and the landscape has changed since then.
It has.
And your ability to get 1,000 True Fans is, now it's possible, and a lot of websites will sell you that. Substack will sell you that, and like I started reading about Substack and Ghost and stuff because I'm looking at redoing my website. So they'll talk about all the audience of newsletters that get paid for things. Patreon is going to sell you all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of websites, and of course TikTok and everybody else are going to sell you on the possibility of you garnering an audience and getting paid for what you do. But that's in their interest. They earn the most from it. There's a lot of people that are struggling on the way to get anything through, and that don't make a living from any of their influence of the content they post. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, or anybody shouldn't do it.
I mean, we are right here, right now.
We're doing it right here, but we're doing it. I know very well that it takes a lot of effort, and that just generally speaking, even if a few people download your show, that's not going to get you anywhere.
This is what the kids don't understand.
I was surprised to find out when I was doing my podcast that if on average you get 100 people listening to every one of your episodes, which is pretty much where I was at back then a few years ago when I was publishing regularly, you're in the top 5 to 10%.
Wow.
But you're still nowhere near getting money for your podcast.
Wow.
Nowhere near anybody wanting to advertise for you. And I didn't particularly want to have advertising. It's so, and how do you count the 1,000 True Fans? Because if I remember correctly, he's talking about people who will pay for your content.
Yeah.
And to have 1,000 people pay for your content, you probably need at least 100,000.
He's I haven't read the post for a while, but I do remember thinking, I like
it's a very good idea, but it's old now, and anyway, all that to say, I think it's very interesting. It's probably not where I would go find inspiration, but go figure. I would read Tim Urban. And the funny point about Tim Urban is that I could also see in the book that there's things that I don't think I agree with him politically. For example, I'm probably more radical to the left, but it doesn't matter. I like to talk, and I think we need to. And I'm more, and he talks about like people more radical to the left, their job is to pull things in that direction, which I would see my job as. But I think that's one of the main things that I'm unhappy about at the moment, is I feel there's too much discrepancy, and I self-censor myself between more and more of my political stance and opinions and what I feel I should talk about to get work in marketing and advertising. Does that make sense?
So does that mean do you feel you're compromising yourself to get work?
Yes, well, I feel I shouldn't talk about my political opinions in a business environment that is more likely to be
Uh-huh.
not what I agree with, but then
Uh-huh.
I don't really know, and I haven't really opened or gone too far in that direction. I'm just talking about just stuff, and also kind of thinking, because of the supercharged polarized environment, that
Mm.
talking political is probably not a good idea altogether.
Mm.
Um, Now, it's also an excuse for not doing things, probably, but
Yes. Yeah, but I think it goes back to what we were both saying about. I agree. I find myself agreeing with bits of both extremes and thinking, why can't we all just get along? Why can't we have a conversation? Why can't we just talk and find what we agree about and
yeah.
find what's useful?
So Tim Urban's
And I'm only
perspective is saying that we're all
talking about
thinking like
teaching.
Golem, hitting one another like cavemen, rather than actually talking like illuminated human beings that we also are.
I'm
Illuminated.
glad
That
you
didn't
say.
make sense. Enlightened. Sorry,
No, it
that's what I
makes
meant.
sense. That makes sense. Illuminated, light, enlightened. We also. I'm glad you said we also are, because we have that. We're both of
Well,
those
we're
things.
both, yeah.
It's easy to think, oh, we're superior, we're better than everyone. No, we're not.
Oh,
We're
it's
just,
also easy to think that. Yeah, that's not the point at all. Yeah.
I like the ladder.
Cool. Do you want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a bit before we go?
Well,
Or is there more to say on this topic? Because we could keep
he,
going on that one, I think. But
we could keep. We're probably going to come back to this in later things, but
I think we
I
will.
did want to show you. So I read this. So I got this for Christmas.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Oh, it's so good. Hardback.
Very
It's
nice.
amazing. It's so good. So I read it and I was like, but there's so much left. There's so much left. This isn't
So is
even
this matching the first movie, or what is this?
not. It's not
No,
even. It's
not
completely
even.
different. It's
Okay.
so I was like, okay.
So it's a graphic novel of the book.
It is,
Okay.
but it's not even like that much of the book. So I
Oh,
got the second part and I read the second part as well. And it's honestly, I love it. I
yeah.
absolutely love it. And I've read the first 3 Dune books, and it might be my favorite thing. Dune. It might be overtaking other stories than that. It's so good. However, I've heard that everything after the third one isn't worth reading. Now, I read the
I
first one, and the
think it's
first one
worth.
is.
I think it's worth reading. It gets weirder and weirder by the end. I don't even remember the end.
Have you read them all? Have you
Yeah,
read like?
a long
Are
time
you read,
ago, but yeah.
so because I read the first one
I
about
think
20
it's
years
I think
ago.
it's harsh to say they're not worth reading. It gets increasingly weirder, spiritual, stranger from a story perspective.
Okay.
So weird that I don't even know. I couldn't tell you how the whole thing ends. And I just feel I have the vague memory of being just perplexed and going, all right, well, I guess that's over then. But each book gets increasingly weirder anyway.
Okay. And
I wouldn't say they're not worth reading though. I mean,
okay, that's
still,
interesting. I'm glad you said that. That's interesting because I'm a bit of a completist, I think. But
yeah, but
it's
for that reason only, I think it's worth reading the whole thing.
okay because
I
there's
don't
loads
even
of
I can't
books.
even tell you what I mean. I can tell you bits and pieces of what it's about, but that would be spoiling, so I'm not going to go there. I'm trying to remember. I read them a long time ago. I was a teenager.
Okay, because I read the first one in my 20s, and I was so blown away. I was so blown away. It's such a great, complete
Everything past the
story.
third one, it gets completely. I mean, if I
Because
remember correctly, the fourth one skips 1,000 years to begin with, so that gives you an
oh,
idea.
does it? Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
There's a
Well,
point where you go, all right, 1,000 years later, and you're like, oh, okay.
I mean, he is talking about huge concepts in it. So I mean, yeah, the third book was I really enjoyed the third book as well. So I'm very excited to read all the graphic novels because they've done really well. It does.
Cool.
It's very immersive, which is what you want for a graphic novel.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I reread Watchmen as well, and then
You mentioned.
I've also got these because and I think we'll talk about this next week, but or another call. I got this, which was Kickstarter funded. Have I showed you this?
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, I've
My
seen
volume,
I've seen it in bookshops.
my volume 2 arrived,
Oh, cool.
so I
So
haven't
is
read
that
that
also
yet.
both of them were for part of the Kickstarter, or?
Yeah, Yeah, so I think I'm going to be getting them all, which I'm quite excited about.
Cool.
But there's something very different about the medium, graphic novel medium.
I really like graphic novels. I should read some. I'm behind on all my books for the year, and I'm behind because of the number of my Goodreads challenge is large because a lot of them are graphic novels.
Right.
I split up my objective, so I've got 24 books and 31 graphic novels, and 31 because small mangas are quick to read, but I've not read a lot recently. So yeah, I usually read a bunch if I go to one of my friends or my brothers who have a lot, and or I go to the library. There's a couple of series that I have that I want to keep buying. There's one that I'm missing a few books, but those are a little bit large. But yes, I want to finish that one this year. Yeah, anyhow. And graphic novels are cool. I like to have them. They do take a lot of shelf space, and they're not cheap. They're not cheap, but
and I do want to read Sandman. I do want to get a great copy of that.
Sandman is fantastic.
Immerse myself in. Yeah. But I also keep coming back to Bird by Bird, and I still haven't finished it, but I read it.
Finished it? Or...
No, but it's so good.
I might reread it, actually.
It's really inspiring. It's really, really inspiring. I really like her writing style. And I think combined with the neuroscience of writing thing is getting me thinking about how I write and why I write. And then the other book I started reading was the second Dresden Files book.
That's awesome. That's great. A lot of fun.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Except I like having.
I'm glad I'm converting you to that one because it only gets better after that.
And I read the first one.
The second one is very good, and they get better.
Yeah, because the first one I really enjoyed the first one.
Yeah,
it's
the second one was great too.
But it's
what's it called again? Is it Full Moon? No, Full Moon.
Yes, Full Moon.
It is Full Moon. Yes,
all right, cool. Pretty Full Moon. Yes, Full Moon. I remember reading the first one, thinking this. The writing isn't great and it feels really predictable, but do you know, I've read I want to know what happens next, and the next thing I know I'm like, this is so good. Why am I resisting this and judging it? Because it's really good.
Yeah,
it's really good,
and it works. The expense is like that. I mean, I spent Monday and Tuesday reading really late, and I've started the sixth one. The fifth one because 9, and then they've got a collection of short stories, but 9 of them to the
and it's one. Pretty scientifically on the money, apparently, is it?
I mean, I didn't go check,
but it's very easy. Is it easy read, or is it just a?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to comment on. It's very easy to read. Yeah, it's made to be crazy page turners. Very short chapters, swap characters every chapter. The structure is always the same book per book, so every chapter has the name of the character who's leading, whose perspective it is, and each book has 3 to 5 characters that you swap around with.
That's clever,
and it's very well done. So you just really want to keep pushing through and there's a lot going on to each book. So, but each book is also quite different. It's also interesting because it feels very engineered, but very well engineered. It seems engineered for it to be a page turner, for it to be a bestseller, for it to be a TV show. It's built in seasonal arcs. So it feels like each book is kind of like each book is a seasonal arc.
And of course, they can turn it into.
But also, each book has got slightly different genre orientations. While
did you watch
being a complete
the TV series?
I've only seen one episode, and then I dropped it and thought I really wanted to read the book because I heard so many good things about the book. And so now I'm in the middle of the books, and I will see about the TV shows later.
Okay. So many books, so little time.
Oh yeah, and I've also started Trickster Makes This World from Lewis Hyde that I've been meaning to, and I just bought. I'm buying too many books. But
what's that about?
That's about.
And who's Lewis Hyde?
It's a exploration of the trickster figure in mythology and art, and it seems really interesting. It's been on my list for a while, and I haven't progressed on Debt whatsoever. I'm still at the beginning of the book. Can't read everything.
Who's Lewis Hyde? Is he someone famous?
Lewis Hyde? No, he's not famous. But he's not famous. He's renowned in small circles, I believe.
Okay.
Mostly known for a book called The Gift, and The Gift was one of the books that was one of the reading material in a landmark course I did a few years ago, partnership exploration.
Okay.
And The Gift, so he's mostly known for The Gift, and The Gift is a anthropology and art book about the culture of giving as a. So he talks about and distinguishes the idea of a gift economy and a giving economy rather than a market economy.
Wow.
And that there's a lot of examples in civilization where rather than exchanging something, you give a gift. So it's super interesting. And he talks about all the different traits of these aspects of different civilizations. And how
so
that
you read The Gift?
Yeah, a few years ago. Super interesting book.
The Trickster sounds cool though.
It does. So apparently it's quite dense, but it has really, really good reviews. And I've been meaning to read it because I'm interested in the subject matter and
The Fool, the Joker, Play.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and it's funny because for a very long time and still I'm thinking about I want to write fiction, but maybe nonfiction comes easier to me. But what doesn't come easier is all the overthinking about things. Even the posts I wrote like this week, they're very simple stuff, but I still spend a while, and then I go on tangents because I'm like, is what I'm saying right? Should I go check? I go check. But a lot of people don't worry too much about what they're saying is right, and they just say it with a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
But when I'm writing, I can talk with confidence when I'm talking like this and appear like I know what I'm talking about, but mostly I don't. But most people don't. No, it was interesting. I was with my aunt last week, and she started saying things with fervor, and like, she started getting worked up about the topic she was talking about, and getting angry about the US and their imperialism. She's like, this is in their founding documents. And I was like, which founding document? The Constitution? She's like, no, the other founding document. It was like the Declaration of Independence. Like I'm fairly sure the Declaration of Independence doesn't talk about world domination. I don't think it is. And she's like, no, it's another document. I was like, well, which document are we talking about? She didn't know, but she was still talking very, very fervently and angrily about this thing.
It's the zealot. It's the
zealot. And I was like, and so once you have the reference for that, I was seeing it all over it. And I'm like, well, then we're not having a real discussion because you don't know what you're talking about, and I just have to receive your opinion on the fact that there's some kind of founding document that places the US in their world domination and imperialism, and I'm pretty sure there isn't. Or I don't think so. Maybe there is, but I don't think it's in the founding documents of the United States of America. Now, you can criticize the imperialism of America, and I will probably agree with you, but I don't think it's in. You got the point.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so good.
But yeah, most people do talk like that. And I was like, what are we talking about? Oh yeah, it's just this thing. Well, yeah, but then your argument doesn't have any, base. He talks about, and of course he goes over fallacious arguments, which I was asking at the table at the same for the same token in the conversation in French for the translations of fallacious arguments.
I don't know what the word is.
But that's how it's spelled. Fallacious.
The problem is, I think of fellatio.
Yeah, I know, me too, but I don't know how. So then I'm not her. How do you pronounce it?
Okay, that might be a topic for another time.
Yeah.
So basically, read books.
Yes, read books.
Something we keep saying anyway, but specifically read Tim Urban.
Yes, and if you've just gone on a 3-hour bender on TikTok, what have you gotten out of it?
Nothing. Or something.
Maybe a couple of interesting things, but mostly you don't remember. So you should read.
Yeah, read books. Read Tim Urban.
Games, if not.
Read David Graeber, play video games. And
so how was the Dungeons and Dragons movie before we go?
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe we should talk about that another time. But I loved it. It was just a lot of fun to watch. I'm
glad you liked it.
I thought that what's his face? He played the Harper.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on. The characterizations are great. Now, did you ever watch the TV series, the cartoon?
Yeah, of course. Back when I was a kid.
Did you spot the Easter egg?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I was
That was
worried that you
fantastic.
didn't, because I didn't. Davina was
Oh, you
like,
didn't?
look. I was like, what?
Yeah, I did. It was like, oh my God, they're there
It was
in the
the thing.
background.
Like, what? Really? Oh yeah. How did I not spot that? And Davina spotted it.
Oh, awesome.
I'm a
great.
failure of a geek.
She enjoyed it as well?
She thought it was okay. She didn't enjoy it as much as I did.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
I thought it was great too. We watched Air as well.
Oh yeah, how was that? That's just coming out here.
Surprisingly good. I didn't think I would enjoy it, and I did.
Okay.
But Davina really wanted to see it. But Dungeons and Dragons, the Paladin character was so good.
Oh, that was fantastic. The Paladin was amazing.
Well done. It was
so great.
Because what I could imagine, now I never played Dungeons and Dragons with a group of people when I was young. I kind of wanted to, but it never happened. And I just feel that if each person was playing one of those characters, that the person playing the Paladin would be this kind of upstart, annoying person who'd be perfect every time. And I don't know if that's true, but that's what I was left feeling like. I almost felt like I was watching a bunch of people play a game.
That's the whole idea.
And I thought it was honestly,
which is also why I think it's a good example that like characters that are too extreme, which is exactly what teenagers will do. They will tend to do characters that are extreme.
Yeah.
And characters that are extreme don't have a hard time working with other people. So you have a hard time as a group.
Wow.
But that's also why it seems like it's better for that character to come in, do a few things, and leave again, because on the long run, it will be, that character is too extreme to operate as a group. But it's very funny. No, particularly in a group of thieves, it doesn't work.
It was really well done. It was
very good. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's very funny. It's great.
It makes the point about how important play is. I think this is something we always come back to: play, cooperation. And I'm listening to you talk about playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I want to talk more. I need to get back to that's why I wrote my post about the new Zelda game on Friday. I thought, well, I've started writing again. Sometimes not being inspired, but I need to write about what I say my thing is, which is play. But I don't really write about it all that much. I see other people do more things on that side than I do. So it's about time to get back to it. But I still play, and I still, I play video games, I play games, I read about stuff to do with game design and gaming. So I don't know what I would be writing about if I write it. I do have one idea for a nonfiction book, which is still the one I'm writing on, but the one related to the Joker, but I still don't know what the
thesis point would be.
I sort of have the beginning thesis thread, but I don't know where it's going or what the point of the book would exactly be. If that makes sense. The conclusion.
Does that matter?
I don't know. Maybe not.
So
I don't know if I need to have it ahead of time, but I think it kind of matters to have one.
You'll just evolve. It happens.
Yeah, maybe not.
Read bird by bird. That's what she talks about.
Or circled another way, like what's the value of the book? Because for example, the "What's Our Problem" by Tim Urban. Some criticism was made in the Reddit I read about the fact that there's this whole gigantic chapter about the left, and then you go straight to the end of the book and it's just a few pages. So he said that's one thing that actually, if I might release another edition to buff up the end a little bit, to circle back and conclude properly. But then the value ultimately, while the end I think has value, the value of the book is really in the beginning and the principles I shared with you. Ultimately, there's a lot more. There's more than that in the book, but really that's the core value, I think. So it's like he's already given it to you at the beginning of the book. Sort of. I mean, it's just debatable, but for another day.
So next time we speak, we should have Zelda on the agenda. We should have I started playing Breath of the Wild again, and I had not played the downloadable content, so I'm kind of doing that at the moment. We'll talk about posts and writing, like what you're going to write about. Yes. I'm going to have some more stuff written. Great. And, well, we'll see what else comes up. But I think I should have finished let me say this, like, I reckon I will have finished Bird by Bird by the next time we speak.
I might start reading it again.
I think it will help.
But really, I should spend time writing. I've spent some time writing and posting, which I want to keep up for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple posts, things that don't take too long to write. So I want to keep doing that. But I also should get into a bit longer ones. But I do have quite a bit of things. We're moving next weekend, so my partner's moving into this place. So I have a lot of cleaning and sorting out to do, and it's going to be a bit messy next weekend. But that's okay.
Yeah. Are you going to have to remove some books to create shelf space? Oh dear.
I've put stacks of books, and so I have to create shelf space. It's a bit of anyway, it's a bit of a puzzle.
It's a puzzle. It's a game of Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Yeah, because it's not a very big apartment, and I really need more storage space, but I don't have access to the cellar here, etc.
All right. Well, we'll talk creatively whenever we speak next.
Yes, absolutely. Good speaking. It's a pleasure.
Of course.